Cradle. And as usual, I am joined by my colleagues, the content creator and writer for The Cradle, Karim Shami, and columnist and editor for The Cradle, Sharmin Arwani. And please, as soon as everyone arrives, all of our faithful viewers and listeners, leave the thumbs up, leave a like, leave a comment, help us beat the censorship, help us win over the algorithm so that this video goes out to more and more subscribers and we can continue to grow The Cradle. As usual, not a lack of news, never a lack of news here. And well, let's start with what's happening in Lebanon. The discussions between in the Lebanese cabinet to disarm Hezbollah. Right. The first session happened, and you guys will correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was Tuesday, right? Was the first session. Some Hezbollah and Amal MPs walked out of the session in protest. They restarted. It's ongoing as we are talking. Let me look up some information I wanted to mention. I saw something that again Hezbollah and Amal MPs have said that they would also walk out again if the government asks for the implementation of the U.S. plan, which I'm checking also Haaretz right now. They have this article that says that their proposal seeks full Hezbollah disarmament and an Israeli withdrawal from Lebanon within 120 days. I want to hear your thoughts, you guys' thoughts on all of this, because Hezbollah, the Lebanese resistance, has been very clear in saying there will be no discussion on disarmament while the Israeli occupation continues to control several strategic points in the south of Lebanon and continues to conduct attacks, the latest of which happened this morning. Just this morning, the south of Lebanon was bombed. A couple of days ago, an 11-year-old kid was killed in the south of Lebanon in an Israeli strike. So the violations continue. And on the other hand, you have, right, the Lebanese president, the Lebanese prime minister, Nawaf Salam, and no, wait, it's the other way around, Joseph Aoun and Nawaf Salam, respectively, who have a leadership that is imposed by the United States, like completely imposed, not under fire, under threat of further war. They are coming in and saying, just like we need to disarm the resistance. That's their mandate. That's their only rule at this point. So, what have you heard? What do you think? And where is this going to go from now? Is there a possibility that the Lebanese government today will call for an immediate disarmament of the Lebanese resistance?
They already called for that, and they said that they are waiting for the military proposal at the end of this month. So the government asked the Lebanese army to give a full plan how and when they will disarm Hezbollah. So for us, the deal has been already done, and everybody is waiting, and many people are afraid, including me. Yani, we don't know if we are on the verge of a civil war because. I see many similarities between today and 1982, and back then also the army was split into two, and it might happen again because we know that the people that support the resistance are a huge amount in Lebanon, and many of them are inside the army. So I don't think that the army is fully capable of doing that unless Hezbollah accept it. And what Secretary General Naim Asim said 2 days ago, and what the streets of the resistance is saying, they are saying that we will not hand over our weapons. And also the Speaker of the Parliament, who's like who completes Hezbollah, and he's the leader of the Amal movement, he also refuses this. And during the last session, both ministers of Amal and Hezbollah, they left the session once this was put on the table. So I think Lebanon lives in a very dangerous time. And now it's very clear that the government that was imposed by the United States has only one goal, is to disarm Hezbollah because Lebanon is not fine. Yani, and Sharmin can share the same opinion. Yani, we live in a country, we don't have electricity. They didn't do anything for the electricity. We don't have water. Uh, Everything is commercial in Lebanon. You commercially get your electricity, you commercially get your water,
Meaning
The
and
you,
banks took your money.
the banks took your money, you get generators, so you buy private generators from private businesses in order to keep the lights on in your building here.
yeah, and additionally the roads are terrible. Everything, yani. to be honest, yani. But the point is that the government didn't do any of those. Yani, we live in a government that didn't give me anything, and the only thing it wants to take the weapons from the resistance, which is unacceptable.
At a
Like,
time when Lebanon is occupied. By the way, I hear myself very loud, guys. So if you, whenever you speak, just speak up. I don't know. I think we're having a bit of audio issues still. In any
When
case,
are the audio issues going to go away, Kenny?
next time, we'll see.
Okay.
Hala, we have lack of uh, somehow experience. We're getting through.
this is still
Uh,
a DIY podcast. We're still learning. So
yeah.
forgive us if the audio sometimes varies. But nevertheless, Charmaine, you were going to say.
But for our Patreons, yani, they will have the processed and filtered audio, of course. So I would just wanted to add something also that since the agreement between the Lebanese army and the United States and Israel on a ceasefire that was accepted by Hezbollah, till now, according to the latest reports, around 330 Lebanese were killed by Israel, and we have around 10 kilometers squared occupied by Israel in the south. And also, this government did nothing for it. This government uh, issued statements and condemnation of the bombardment of Iran on Qatar 2 months ago, more than they issued any statement condemning the Israeli attacks on Lebanon. So now it's so clear, and there's part of the Lebanese, they feel they are threatened, and we might see like clashes on the ground, because especially after what happened in Syria, people are now يعني feeling the threats more organically and more how can I say it? Sorry. They are feeling the threats more than before, because it's not only talks, because everybody saw what happened in the Sahel, and everybody saw what happened in Suwaida, and many people are afraid to see these scenarios happening in Lebanon, especially in the south.
Yeah, this is it's so imagine living in the States and having, you know, crime go through the roof, um, lacking job security, having food prices increased by 50% from 1 year to the next, um, having natural disasters that wipe out towns, you know, hurricanes and earthquakes and whatever, and raging fires, um, and you know, huge inflation, and then having your government focus entirely on immigrants, which is a very nice way to blame the other for all your ills. But actually, immigrants mostly do jobs that Americans don't want to do. Okay, so imagine that scenario. And you're in Lebanon, you don't have electricity. I can't tell you, just in the last almost up to about 10 minutes before the podcast started, our electricity went off 9 times and our internet was cut. I mean, that kind of recurrence isn't as frequent, but because we all have generators. But you know, and then the government, the entire national discourse is around Hezbollah's weapons. Okay, Hezbollah being fighters, you know, doing the job that Lebanese don't want to do, which is defend their southern border, and then earlier, you know, last decade, defending the border with Syria against Takfiri jihadists that were backed by Western countries and Gulf countries and Turkey. So, you know, Hezbollah is doing the grunt work, the security work that the Lebanese don't want to do and are unwilling to do because they just want to party. And yet the entire national discourse is on that, while Lebanese are enduring an extremely hot, humid summer. Okay. I went to the apartment of someone the other day, and I mean, I'm so lucky to have air conditioning when I want it. But there was no air conditioning. It was just fans, and you know how fans, when it's so hot, it just blows the hot air even worse. And so now, why are they discussing this? You know, the question we ask on the podcast on our thumbnail is Lebanon plunging into civil war? uh, they know that this is where it could go if a law is passed that the that the resistance's weapons are banned, um, that pits, two halves of Lebanon against each other, number one, for no reason except an American demand. Um, it also creates friction within the army. Obviously, people who do support the resistance and do, especially army people, they recognize the important role that Hezbollah played in helping the Lebanese army get rid of the Nusra Front and ISIS from inside the Lebanese border some years ago, in a 9-day operation. Really, Hezbollah put the Lebanese army front and center, gave them all the credit. Everybody knows that Hezbollah played an a pivotal role in this being, happening. So, um, turning the maybe elements of the army against each other, elements of the population certainly. Today, the army commander, I saw this just as I came to do the podcast. The Lebanese army commander, who, from what I hear, is a pretty decent and realistic guy, has also spoken to a Hezbollah official in which he said the army will not enter any of Hezbollah's military centers. Not sure what they mean by centers. It's not like they have military bases around the country. So I guess sensitive areas, Hezbollah's sensitive areas. And he goes on to say, and if a plan is approved by the government, it will be due to pressure from the United States. That's the commander of the Lebanese armed forces saying this, okay? He didn't need to, in the sense that everybody in Lebanon knows that it is the Americans that are making this vote happen. Otherwise, it would be like something nobody in the country would want to touch. Um, but Nawaf Salam, the Lebanese prime minister, he's a friggin' joke. He's a joke. There's nothing the guy does except talk about Hezbollah's weapons, and he came out of nowhere and was installed as Lebanon's prime minister by some sort of backroom deal making. Um, Nawaf Salam, his government is, a media outlet in Lebanon said that his government is under pressure from Saudi Arabia and the U.S. and intends to disarm Hezbollah before the parliamentary elections next summer. So Lebanon's next elections are due um, less than a year from now. And so Nawaf Salam is doing this before the elections because he knows that his government's tenure is short. In short, Nawaf Salam's government has done nothing, nothing, nothing. Doesn't even offer condolences to Lebanese killed by occupying Israeli forces in the south of this country. This is a daily event, the violation of the peace agreement, the ceasefire agreement, and obviously the continuing occupation of Lebanon. This guy's this guy's out. Okay, now um, you know, Hezbollah's obviously weighed in on this and said, yeah, okay, well, as Kenny mentioned, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, in a very fiery speech, said, we're not giving up our arms, dude. What are they going to do? We asked on our last episode, are they is the Lebanese army, or are there going to be militant factions who try to wrest weapons from the hands of Hezbollah fighters? That's never going to happen. They won't even, as we mentioned, disarm Palestinians in Palestinian camps in Lebanon, which was something they said would happen in June this year, and it has not. And then today, the Lebanese foreign minister, who is a member of the Lebanese Forces political party, Lebanese Forces is not the Lebanese military, it's a right wing Christian uh,
Pro
fascist,
US, US back.
pro US, but very fascistic. They'd like only Christian cantons in Lebanon, and they hate anything. I mean, they're, yeah, pro US all the way. So the Lebanese foreign minister, who is from the Lebanese forces, today said that the statements of the Iranian foreign minister regarding Lebanon's internal affairs are rejected and condemned. Now, I didn't actually read, I don't know if you did, Karim, what the Iranian foreign minister said, but given Iran's, elevated, um, you know, state of diplomacy, it was probably like, cautious words, like really the Lebanese should do whatever they can to avoid civil war and confrontations that only benefit the enemy. And the Lebanese forces foreign minister condemned this. So he's condemning the interference of another foreign minister. But if the French president or the US president said, drop your pants, they would, and they would not consider that interference.
Indeed, I have
So
lowered my input
yes.
volume a bit. I don't know if that works better because to try to even ourselves out, although I still hear myself very loudly.
I
Um,
hear you very low, by the way.
Now I'm low. Oh my
Yeah.
god.
So
There's a whole discussion. Go ahead, Karim. Sorry.
there's a
Go ahead.
question from Skating. He says, "Do you think Hazib could accept a deal to avoid civil war?" My answer is that the government should ditch this proposal to avoid civil war, not Hezbollah.
100%. Why are they even discussing it? Because the Americans
Uh,
ordered. If you don't like that, switch up your game. Get rid of the Americans in the sense that, go to other big powers and try to. I mean, the French are pretty useless. They talk more than they do anything. But even just say, okay, we're going to, they're more reasonable than Trump. We're going to see if they cannot help us iron out a situation. Americans are not. Trump doesn't care. This is a shithole country in his view.
Yeah, and we are saying that they should not hand their weapons, but we didn't say why. Hala, in my opinion, the biggest answer is what happened in Syria. The moment Bashar Assad vanished, Israeli forces advanced, and they didn't tell anybody, they didn't ask anybody, they
Mm.
just did it. And currently, Israel
While
occupies.
destroying all of
Yeah,
Syria's
of course.
missiles and anything else they had in their arsenal.
Yeah. Now, Israel occupies 2,000 kilometers squared from Syria. Lebanon as a whole is 10,452 kilometers squared. So they already occupied like 20% the area of Lebanon and Syria in 24 hours. So I asked myself why they didn't do the same in Lebanon. The reason is that because there's resistance and there's Hezbollah, the
Hmm.
same our Hezbollah hands or Hezbollah is more weakened or whatever or accept to hand their weapons, there is nothing that will prevent Israel from entering and occupying South of Lebanon, if not Beirut. They don't care
Um,
about anybody, and they did it in 1978. They did it in 1982, and they did it in 2000, and they tried to do it in 2006, and they tried to do it in uh, last year, 2024, and. And back then there was no Hezbollah. Yeah, when you go to 1982, Hezbollah was created after Israel entered Beirut, and in 1978 there was no Hezbollah. So this is the aim of the Israelis. If you go and look to the on their media and what the official says, they said Israel now is very small and it should expand.
I
And
wanna.
also Trump
Mhm.
pointed that out on the map. He said, "Look, Israel is very small. It should expand. Where should it expand? Lebanon and Syria. It's very obvious for me."
I want to ask in the chat, Joseph, about the audio. I'm very concerned because I keep seeing the discussion because they're saying Karim is very loud, Charmin and I are very low. So
I,
maybe if this is the case, then maybe Karim can lower his volume a bit and then we can continue and everyone, would be
or we
happy
raise our volume.
or you start yelling into the microphone.
I lowered it.
What was I going to say? Yesterday, I saw our good friend, Marwa Osman. She was on the Kawork Almasian show and she was talking about how the day before the ceasefire was imposed on Lebanon, Hezbollah had launched a ballistic missile that actually hit Tel Aviv. And I'm wondering, and I want to hear from you, Karim, on this: is what are the remaining military capabilities that Hezbollah has, and what has the Naim Qassem, and I know we already mentioned this in brief, but what is kind of like the position that Hezbollah is maintaining at this point?
Hezbollah, they were very clear from day one after the ceasefire agreement. They said that now we hand everything to the government. We will give the government time. And it's very clear that the government failed. They did nothing. They don't even condemn anything. Yeah, imagine something happening in the Gulf countries in Saudi Arabia or Qatar or whatever. They go and condemn it. And what's happening in Lebanon, they didn't condemn. Yani yesterday, currently I will air some videos. This happened yesterday in Lebanon. This happened near my village and nobody said anything. Now I'll put the videos. That's one. And second, uh, the government failed Hezbollah and failed the Lebanese people, and now they want them to hand their weapons. And the funny part is that the people that were bombed, the people that were killed, the people that were fighting Israel, they don't want Hezb to hand over their weapons. And the people that are in the government that are sitting far away and they were cheering for the Israelis while their own people were bombed, they want Hezbollah to hand their weapons. That's so insane. The people of the south, they don't want to hand their weapons. So now uh, it's very dangerous what's happening in Lebanon regarding now is that now the minority wants to control the majority, and it wants to control it in the most abusive way possible.
And they
And they
want the
are telling
entire
you,
country to trust
yes,
in the word of the nation that is, conducting a genocide, that is bombing Lebanon, that is bombing like how many countries has Israel bombed since October 7th? Six, seven
they say
nations?
seven,
They
they
say
say
seven
seven
fronts or they
countries.
say
Yeah,
eight fronts. It's just like make
yeah.
up numbers. Little update before I let you go on. Amal movement ministers have withdrawn from the cabinet session now that the Barak paper is being discussed, the US proposal, and then another one says Hezbollah and Amal minister have walked out of the Lebanese cabinet meeting.
Yeah, also I want to give my unpopular opinion. That's only also on Hezbollah. It's not only about Joseph Aoun and Nawaf Salam. Hezbollah, they did many strategic mistakes internally and abroad, which led to this. They they did no actions inside Lebanon. I think Sharmin disagrees, but we need action, even it was whatever it is. If it's a military action, if it's a political action, action should be done inside Lebanon and even via lawyers. Yeah, and many people now are going and like cursing and accusing Hezbollah or people affiliated with Hezbollah with very bad things, and nothing happens. While if I now go online or if I have some followers and I talk about Jaja, who is a war criminal in Lebanon, who slaughtered many people in Lebanon, and he's willing to do it again and again. If I speak anything about him, I will be put on jail. This is also on Hezbollah. Yani the smallest things they didn't do. And here in Lebanon, we have a saying, and in the Arab world, the mistake of the powerful is times 1,000. And that's what happened with Hezbollah. Hezbollah did this mistake. They lost one time, and look what happened. Everybody wants to eat them. They forgot everything they did before. Hezbollah fought ISIS, and they threw ISIS from north of Lebanon. Lebanon, third of Lebanon was occupied, and يعني the area of Lebanon when I was in the school, it was like 7,000 kilometers square. Now it's 10,000 kilometers square. Hezbollah added area, population, and many things to the Lebanese. And now one mistake happened. Look what happened. So I think they have to take action. They have to go to the streets. They have to close roads. They have to do anything to tell the people that we are still here and to give their people hope and to make the people that are willing to eat you at least make them feel a little bit afraid so they will not eat you in a hole.
I
I
just
mean,
want to mention very quickly our chat is cracking me up. Thank you guys so much for the interactions. We have a lot of thirsty commenters after Karim, after Sharmin, after myself. Show us your love with some donations, if you will. Actually, we have one. Lab66, our good friend. Karim Loud, Stevan Low, Sharmin. Perfect. That's what they say. What were you going to say, Sharmin?
I don't. I mean, I agree with Karim in some respect. I mean, with hindsight, we can say that Hezbollah made some mistakes in its execution of the war after October 8th, 2023. I do think that comes from having 18 years of basically managed peace by implementing some very key deterrents against the enemy. But complacency, I think, grew with that. And also, there were other things that happened. I mean, the Syrian war happened, and then Hezbollah expanded super quickly to encompass a lot more fighters, a lot more recruits to go and fight in that theater. And all of a sudden, Hezbollah was involved in Iraq and in Yemen, and so the group did a massive, had a massive growth spurt in a very short amount of time. And I think, people have pointed out that's probably one of the um, reasons security lapses happened. The group grew too quickly without the checks and balances that existed before. But of course, complacency, I think, is one of them, working off a strategy set in 2006 and not needing to adapt it that much because it was working for 18 years. Um, with hindsight, we can say they should have done more earlier. But when you were living in Lebanon after October 8th, you also heard a substantial part of the Lebanese population saying, "Why are we getting involved with a war with Israel? Why are we doing this? Forget Gaza. What does Gaza have to do with us? You're putting Lebanon at risk. The Israelis could bomb us next too." And I mean, that's a legitimate refrain. And I think Hezbollah then Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah was very sensitive about those kind of criticisms, which were legitimate to a certain extent. Of course, Hezbollah has a long-term view of how things would go, but failed to recognize that, you know, I also think the Iranians and other members of the Axis fail to recognize, because they themselves are not like this, how completely barbaric the enemy is and how far it's willing to go to bypass all humanitarian law, all international law to achieve its aims, which are still not clear. So, on the other hand,
I
what
mean, they
happened to
threatened to
Hezbollah?
turn Beirut into Gaza last year.
Yeah, well, they threatened that even before October 7th, to be fair. They've always threatened to decimate Lebanon if blah, 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 but then uh,
Back to the Stone Age. They loved saying that
the
one.
yeah, back to the Stone Age, exactly. It's American rhetoric. Um, but I think the uh, the hits that Hezbollah took late last year also provided. So in chaos and even in retreat and in loss, there's opportunity. And one of these opportunities is to obviously tighten security, investigate the holes, right? The gaps in security, the gaps in their deterrence strategy, and recalibrate in order to then surprise your enemy next round. I mean, the Hezbollah surprised the Israelis in 2006. Israel surprised Hezbollah in 2024. And it's about testing your enemy and then recalibrating. And I think that opportunity for recalibration is here. I don't think Hezbollah's not looking for a civil war, but if necessary, it will bring out its rank and file, not just its rank and file, its millions of supporters, to hit the streets in a peaceful way, to show what numbers we're talking about. Larger demonstrations than we've ever seen in this country. Hezbollah's weapons are just not front and center in everyone's mind, except those that have been heavily propagandized by efforts to heavily propagandize
Yeah,
the Lebanese people.
it's all propaganda. Imagine that when Israel lost in 2006, imagine the government will tell the army, hand over your weapons and let's go back to Europe. Yani, that's the power of propaganda. Yani, what happened in Lebanon is that the war ended. Okay, many people took time to accept that they lost, and everybody now said, now what? But the idea of handing Hezbollah weapons was not on the table. Yani, when you go to a houses or whatever, you don't hear it. Now you hear it everywhere. Even if
Yeah.
people that fought with Hezbollah, this is the power of propaganda. The Lebanese people are being subjected to propaganda on YouTube, on Twitter, on Telegram, cheap propaganda, and we often talk about it. It's like AI propaganda that Hezbollah should hand over their weapons. Now Lebanon is not a Iranian state. Now, Lebanon will be like Dubai, hand over your weapons now. And then the Gulf money poured in, and all the TVs and all the journalists, and even if you have a favorite singer, before him starting to sing in a concert, he will say, "Yeah, free Lebanon, we love life, be like us," and then they start
Iran out.
singing.
Iran out.
It's so obvious.
Let me
But
read a couple of.
unfortunately, I am from the a minority who is immune to Western propaganda and Israeli propaganda. But most
Look at
people are
you.
not.
Give me 1 second, guys. I want to read a couple of things. Hella X JDM 499. They say love from NYC on my birthday. Happy birthday, Hella X JDM. We have a new Cradle fan member here in the YouTube channel, Yorkshire Sam. Thank you so much. Gulnara Marchis, good old friend, also a $50 donation. Thank you so very much for that. And we have someone, I saw this here, that they said that they joined the Patreon. I don't care about the perks, just want you guys to be able to continue. Thank you so much. Pray, bro. This. Thank you guys so much. I just wanted to make that little pause there.
Yeah, I don't expect any big moves by Hezbollah. I think they'll do what uh, the Axis typically does, which is try to contain the situation and not let it escalate. During the entirety of the last almost 2 years, we've seen this side try to not escalate, to send messages that we will respond in kind. So don't escalate. Uh, so using missiles in order to de-escalate. This is actually what they did in 2006 as well. But the Israeli and U.S. enemy views this as a weakness. I think it's very stupid for them to do so. I mean, Netanyahu claimed that in Israel's operations late last year, they took out 70% of Hezbollah's missiles. Now, let's imagine, given that this is Netanyahu, there's an exaggeration there, okay? But let's also imagine that he's exactly correct. We were hearing numbers before the war. Correct me if I'm wrong, Karim, that Hezbollah has around 150,000 missiles. So there's a lot of missiles left. They're not going to be used. They will be used if Israel's stupid enough to decide to militarily escalate. Right now, Hezbollah's, I think, intent is to contain what's happening in the south and put pressure on this government. You see, this, like I said, this government is doing nothing for anybody in Lebanon. They're just literally repeating tired American slogans and trying to carry out the US's agenda. Come next year, if the situation remains the same, they are likely to be voted out. And so that's one reason to bide its time. I don't expect any big brash moves. I don't expect any different strategy to ever become apparent to people unless there's a war. I think Hezbollah will return back to their very, very secretive posture in this country where we will not hear anything unless it's absolutely essential, which will absolutely kill Karim because if he doesn't see it, it doesn't exist. So I will try to keep the man in check.
We have a 499 pound donation from South Pat. Thank you so very much. Well, as I said, the ministers have walked out of the session, so it really just feels. I mean, it feels like it's such a crucial issue, right? Like that's how it's presented, and that's how it,
It
like
is.
you
It
guys have
is.
described it, is incredibly crucial.
Yeah, and
But at the same time, it kind of seems like the political echelon in Lebanon is approaching it like they approach everything else, which is just like keep kicking the can down the road, and then something will happen, I guess.
But
Uh,
things will change in Lebanon. I mean, this is the thing how Lebanon has always seen itself in a way and openly acknowledged it that it's kind of a mailbox for the region. It's where people send messages to each other. The Saudis, the Turks, the Israelis, the Americans, the Iranians, anybody. This is the post office of West Asia. The thing is, given its size and its, not having a lot of clout in the region by itself, though it did when Hezbollah was strong, right? Not having any clout now, being everyone's sort of punching bag, Israel's punching bag and Syria's punching bag now. I think Lebanon will try, as it has for many years, to tread water until something changes in the world around them. And interestingly, that might not come from West Asia and what happens in neighboring states. It might come from as far away as Ukraine. And I think it's a good opportunity to sort of switch to something else that is big in the news today, which is um, movement on US Russian talks on Ukraine.
possible
Um,
Putin Trump meeting, right?
Possibly, yes, and possibly in the UAE of all places. So,
Shock. I'm
yeah,
absolutely shocked.
Kremlin aide today um, said that Russia has received a an acceptable offer from the US on settling the Ukraine conflict.
You gotta love
Um,
their wording.
yeah, well, that's much more than they've said in the past weeks. I mean, they basically have, you know, said that the Americans are not serious. They're not even reading their documents. They're not even, I mean, when you put forward a position, and Russia has long put forward a position on what their absolute red lines are and what they would like, and not had any, positive US response. When I say positive, I mean where some movement is created and some goodwill is generated. So today, the Kremlin aide said that they'd received a proposal from the Americans. The Russians are willing, are ready to consider it, and would not provide further details, which I think is how it should be done. The moment details leak to the media, experts, commentators, journalists weigh in, politicians weigh in, and create waves of pressure. Okay, that basically, you know, um, upend a lot of progress in talks. I remember this very vividly at the when I attended when I was in Vienna for the 2015 JCPOA meeting, and every time something looked to be going positively, the French would make a statement or someone else would make a statement, and all of a sudden, the positive energy was set back. So they said that the Russians and the Americans have topics to discuss. They agreed with the view of U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who earlier described the talks as, a good day. um, he says, Rubio said, we have a ways to go, but we're certainly closer to peace today than we were yesterday when we weren't close at all. This is meaningless, by the way.
What
Russians,
gibber jabber is that? What
well,
gibberish is that?
no, I mean, he is saying that something good seems to come out of this. And I don't imagine the Russians have changed their position. The Americans have, because TikTok Trump's ultimatum time is running out, so he doesn't like that.
It's
And
tomorrow, right? The ultimatum.
is it? I don't
I
know,
think
10
so.
days
I
or
want to
12
mention
days.
something very
But
quickly
wait,
because
let me just
go
say
ahead.
that in the interim, Ukraine today launched a drone attack on an oil refinery inside Russia in Krasnodar. And that's just, you know, what what are they doing? And it makes me think, to be honest, that the positive signs, I mean, the most positive signs right now, or the most positive progress right now, in my view, would be to sideline the spoilers, because there have been spoilers for this deal for a long time. And the main public spoiler is, I mean, other than the, crazy neocon and neoliberal Atlanticists in Washington and their little spawns in the European Union, is Zelensky, who's like, who's milked this for financial gain, and basically created a suck hole of like US dollars and European euros that have disappeared without being accounted for. And so I wonder if this could really mean that the Americans have said, okay, all of these things become more open to discuss, but we've got to like rock the boat a little bit. And one of those things is, to sideline Zelensky. I've argued this for a long time, that if Zelensky was sidelined and so is Netanyahu, you could actually have meaningful, long lasting ceasefires in both conflict zones.
Remember that I think it was last week, the Russian security, the intelligence, they came out with this report saying that the UK and US officials met with the top Ukrainian authorities to discuss replacing Zelensky, right? To discuss post Zelensky Ukraine. I guess the comedian's time is coming up. And I wanted to mention this in regards to what is coming out today, right? Today in Axios, our good friend Barak Rabir, former Unit 8200 member, by the way, it says that who is it? Putin advisor Yuri Ushakov revealed that Trump and Putin have agreed to meet next week, but nevertheless they're saying like that the meeting might actually take more to bring about, because what the U.S. wants is for Putin to meet with Zelensky. But
And the Russians have said niet on that.
Yeah, exactly. Why would you give legitimacy to a guy that nobody likes anymore? Remember when Zelensky used to be
Exactly.
bigger than Jesus? When he
Yeah.
was like literally the beacon of Western society? Oh my
Didn't
God,
he
how
and
the
his
mighty
wife
have fallen.
pose on the cover of Vogue or something like that in like
Yeah.
Yeah, and his wife also.
yeah, it
The
was
man did so many photo shoots.
yeah.
He had a good
Yeah.
time. He had a good
So
time.
I mean I just think all of these are signs that Zelensky is going to be downgraded if not cut out altogether. I think that's a positive thing, he was the face for the spoilers and with him out of the picture they can, as they always do, insert someone who wants to extricate Ukraine from them from this crisis and agree to territorial losses, which I mean anyways the oblasts, right, that were voted for in referendums for independence are gone. But recognition, international recognition that these territories are Russian. And if they don't, I mean, I've always said, take Odessa, cut the Ukrainian, Nazis off from waterways. I don't, whatever. I think the Russians are awful, almost Hezbollah like and Iran like in not going for gold, not going for the brass ring when they can. You know,
Very interesting. I don't know if Karim, you want to add something about Putin and Trump and all of these, or if we can move on to another topic that I have here on the list.
No, we can move on.
Tomorrow, there's a very interesting meeting happening in Washington, D.C. And we've talked about this before at some length between Armenia and Azerbaijan. They're going to meet tomorrow with
mhm.
Trump. Who is that? What's the name of the Armenian guy? Peseshnian or something?
Pashinyan.
Pashinyan and Aliyev of Azerbaijan are expected in Washington, D.C. tomorrow morning to sign a peace agreement that includes exclusive U.S. development rights to a strategic transit corridor through the South Caucasus. And this is, of course, the Zangezur corridor, something we have spoken about here at the Cradle. We have multiple articles about it. We have explained, right, how this threatens Iranian, well, connectivity. Same for Russia, same for China, the BRI,
Mm.
the Belt and Road Initiative, and the U.S. wants 100-year lease to control the Zangezur corridor, which is well, that's quite something. Uh, what do you guys think is going to happen tomorrow? And is this going to open the doors for any, huge, I don't know, I guess like shifts in West Asia?
Being the United States involved, I am pretty sure no project will be established at least because I did my own research and I used the three AI tools and I asked them the same question. One was, or in the question was, in the last 25 years, how many roads, hospitals, or any infrastructure the United States did outside its border? And the answer was zero.
Um,
Uh, so I don't think the United States is capable, or now they have like something in their foreign policy to allow them to establish anything. And I'm not kidding. I did this research because I was researching about Iraq. Uh, since 2003, since their occupation in Iraq, they didn't build even a wall in Iraq.
They build
Oh my
military
God! I
bases.
just wait. I need to read you
Yeah.
guys this.
Okay.
This is about what they're gonna sign tomorrow. Armenia plans to award the United States exclusive special development rights for an extended period on a transit corridor that will be named the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. They
Wow.
are
Oh,
renaming
it's so
the
funny.
Zangezur corridor to the Trump Route for International. Ah, God,
Wow.
what times are we even living in? What are we even talking about?
Yeah, and I will pull up a map to explain why this is very odd for us. It's because not long ago, a big chunk of the land was annexed by Azerbaijan, and it was for Armenia, and this happened under the blessing of the United States. No, Sharmin?
What? Oh, the
The
Nagorno
Nagorno Karabakh.
Karabakh. Yeah. Okay. So not to, glorify him or anything, but Zbigniew Brzezinski, the old Cold War warrior, intellect and analyst, has, is quite remarkable in his observations sitting in Washington on many, many parts of the world. And in his sort of, um, major piece, the Grand Chessboard, he says he refers to Azerbaijan as, quote, the vitally important cork in the bottle containing the riches of the Caspian Sea basin and Central Asia. Azerbaijan has been on the radar of the smart people in the Atlanticist, community for a long time. Now, when the Soviet Union uh, fell apart, Azerbaijan came into its own. Prior to that, the USSR decided policy, right? And these countries, more or less, the like Georgia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, etc., they came. Um, uh, they still were under some kind of, I mean, Russia was the big hegemon in their region, but they have, many of them have either burst out and, developing their own foreign policies, or have partnered with Russian enemies sometimes in promoting color revolutions and regime changes in their countries. But this Azerbaijan has become very important because Azerbaijan has become a very, very likely tool for the NATO crowd to implement, um, uh, you know, a design for Central Asia, the South Caucasus, that would be a real irritant to the Iranians and the Russians. So not only is Azerbaijan energy rich, but its head of state is very purchasable and quite belligerent in you know about taking, very aggressive in wanting to play an oversized foreign policy road in the region, to be part of the connectivity, to be part of the pipelines that his, where his country produces the energy for. He is looking at his regional map all the way to Europe and thinking, I can do this, why should anyone else, right? And of course, he's been buoyed by his partnership with Erdogan's Turkey, that who also has a very aggressive stance about expansion of power and influence and territory in the region. So Nagorno-Karabakh was, I mean, you can see on the map that it's sort of like center west and then drops all the way down close, but not on the Iranian border. And you can see with that territory coming in Azerbaijan's hand after the last war, um, it's all they then need to do is to to cut through Armenia. I mean, Armenia is not useful to them now, and really, and this is so shocking. But the secretary, sorry, the Turkish Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, um, Bayraktar, who's, the same as the drone that Turkey's been exporting
Bay
to.
Bayraktar.
Qatar,
Bay, Bay,
Bayraktar.
I don't know.
that guy.
He said very recently that in the near future, all energy resources and logistics flows through the Zangezur corridor, which is a phantom corridor, doesn't exist yet. Okay, it's a dream of the Turks and the Azerbaijanis, and now of NATO, who sees a very, very useful tool to upset the Iranian and Russian plans in the region. Okay, he says that all energy resources and logistic flows through the Zangezur corridor will be directed to Turkey. Okay, Turkey has had gas hub aspirations, being an relatively energy poor country itself for a long time, has had these aspirations for a really long time. Now it's really deal making aggressively to try to get to that, with, Iraq never actually landing on its feet, and with Syria now in chaos. This is, and Israel's attack on Iran, which the Turks will view as a weakening of Iran, but others in the region don't see that way. The Turks are going full on, with hegemonic ambitions. Uh, Currently, electricity from Azerbaijan is supplied to Turkey through Georgia, But in the future, Bayraktar says that energy resources from Central Asia will come directly to Turkey and then to Europe, and they're talking about implementing this project within 5 years. Okay, according to this schedule, basically Armenia in its current formation will no longer exist. Okay, because they will have all kinds of routes through that little sliver. If you put the map on again, now that Azerbaijan has Nagorno Karabakh, basically you have that sliver, that little boot of Italy type thing that cuts off the, how do you say it, Nakhchivan region of Azerbaijan
Nachkiban.
with, yeah, with Azerbaijan proper, and they'd like that to go away. And actually, what protection does Armenia have from a full-on occupation by Azerbaijan? None, because its head of state, Pashinyan, has absolutely capitulated to the West in the worst way possible. He has sold Armenian sovereignty and territorial integrity in a way that is unimaginable. And I don't know how he's still alive, to be honest. And he's attacked the church in Armenia, who which is a very prominent aspect of society there, and who have pushed back against his crazy ideas. So what's going to be interesting, and we have an article on Monday, scheduled for Monday, that will go through what was agreed in Washington tomorrow and what this means for Armenia and the region. But this Zangezur corridor, we did a piece recently saying that actually there were other corridors. You didn't actually need the Zangezur right on Iran's border, which Iran rejects. You know,
Exactly.
there are other ways to get what you want done, but these guys are going for Iran's jugular. And this actually made me so Iran and Russia, it's not like they're best friends. They have very, very big differences in many, many geopolitical and geoeconomic issues, but they're never discussed out loud, okay? Because they are partners on very, very large geopolitical and geoeconomic topics, and they have the common enemy that is coming at them. So they don't air their dirty laundry. But for instance, on the Caspian Sea, and maybe you can pull up that map, Karim, um, in the Caspian Sea, Iran and Russia, while being at odds on a lot of things like seabed ownership or rights and etc., they came together very early on. So in 2014 and then in 2018, implemented in an agreement with all the littoral states of the Caspian Sea that basically no non-littoral ships or countries, non-littoral countries of the Caspian Sea would be able to bring military ships in this sea. And this was so important. This is when we saw Iran and Russia thinking very, very similarly on let's keep the Americans at bay. The Americans have had Central Asia and the Caucasus in their sights for well over a decade now, and incrementally pushing. In Azerbaijan, by the way, British Petroleum, which is basically an extension of the MI6 and the Foreign Office, and the Atlanticist, has spent $87 billion in the last 3 decades in oil and gas exploration, development, and transportation projects. The British are front and center, ahead of everybody, in the exploitation of Azerbaijan for their own economic benefit, okay, and hegemonic goals. Azerbaijan has become a NATO playing field. And while we're distracted by Ukraine and, crying over what is happening in Gaza, what is playing out in Azerbaijan and Armenia is no laughing matter. This has huge implications for the Americans because they always miscalculate. This will push Iran and Russia much closer together on everything from corridor determination, by the way, and China, because like Turkey, Azerbaijan, these Turkic countries that Erdogan is really, really ramped up influence in. They view chunks of Chinese territory as Turkish, chunks of Russian territory as Turkish, and of course the north of Iran as Turkish. So these three countries in yet another conflict zone are being pushed together to form natural alliance against the onslaught coming against them from the beginning of the cradle, right? Karim, you'd never heard of Zangezur corridor, right? I
No,
was obsessed with this little sliver that literally World War III could start over. I'm not kidding. Like we will definitely do a deep dive on this subject very, very soon because
It's
all the
very
routes, the
interesting. Yeah.
Chinese, the Russian, the Iranian, the Indian, are going to be obstructed if the Azerbaijanis, Turks, and NATO get the upper hand.
We have a donation from Lav66 saying that the Iranian spoke people have said that if Western forces or Turkey go into Zangezur, Iran will use military forces against them. I don't know if I've seen that, but I feel like it would be the position of Tehran. In any case, um, we also have, as we had offered before, we have some questions from our patrons, and I feel
Mhm.
like a couple of them maybe we can start answering now, since we're on the topic. We're on the topic of Russia. We're on the topic of the closeness that they have with
Before we
Iran.
go to that, Esteban, let's also point to things that are happening in Gaza because really the temperature is rising so
There's
much
one
there.
question that I
And
feel like
that's
can
usually an
open up the
issue that
door
you
about.
start with.
Well, I mean, in Gaza, what's been happening for the past few days, it's, I guess, the biggest news of the past 24 hours was that in March, the Israeli Security Cabinet agreed to implement the starvation policy that is ongoing now. Uh, they made a deliberate decision to, instead of accepting a deal with Hamas that would have released possibly all of the captives,
Mm.
they instead decided to implement this policy that has up to this point well created the worst famine that has been spreading in the world, and they are also making plans to invade Gaza again. Right, they've ordered the people from Gaza City to leave. You're talking about nearly 1 million people that now Netanyahu he's also fighting with the army. Right, this news about them choosing to starve Gaza instead of doing the deal with Hamas hasn't really had as much impact, especially within Israel, as you would expect, right? Because just a couple of days ago, you had Haaretz come out with a poll that said 79% of Jewish Israelis are not troubled, or are either not troubled or not troubled at all by the reports of famine in Gaza. And I guess that includes the images of the captives who are also starving to death. And what I was going to say is you also have Netanyahu and the army chief kind of going at it,
Mm.
because the army chief is saying the best option for us right now as a military is to withdraw from Gaza and to lay siege to the strip around it. But Netanyahu, because he's Netanyahu, wants the troops to go in and take the entirety of Gaza because he knows this is going to sink the IDF into a very prolonged and very, never-ending war, and he's going to, be able to hold on to power. At the same time, you have about 80,000 Israeli soldiers being treated in Israeli hospitals, many of them
Mm.
for PTSD. You had 7 suicides in July, and today you had the ultra-Orthodox media publish a headline that said war in response to the order of mass conscription of Haredim students. So everything going well inside Israeli society, from what we can tell.
So the Israeli, the poll showing that 79% or whatever not caring about because Israel is a barbaric society. It is absolutely a right-wing, fascistic, barbaric, exclusionist society that is caving on itself because of its,
It
the
is.
inbreeding of these ideas. The Israeli Security Cabinet is expected to approve a plan to expand the war tomorrow, by the way, which shows that Netanyahu, just, kinetic as always, is going to bypass all his military officials, all security officials, and try to with his what's the word, incestuous cabinet, incestuous in the sense of like that crazy mentality they have, to forge forward with war, mass displacement of Palestinians, and the occupation of the Gaza Strip at a time when the entire world has so tired of Israeli brutalities and is so shocked by the starvation that they're seeing now that they want they want an end to the war now, and he's now going to escalate. I don't know. I think Netanyahu feels like he's running out of time. I think the conversation about him potentially being sidelined is very real. And I think that's why he's moving so brazenly, so illegally, outside of any process inside Israel, forget internationally, against his own, um, the commanders he has posted in the top military positions.
Exactly.
He's doing this because he feels he's running out of time. And let me tell you guys, if they manage to sideline or get rid of Zelensky, the Americans and the Russians, in order to forge an agreement, at least the first step of an agreement, the idea will be planted very well that you can get rid of a top US ally, okay, in order to get what you want. And then Netanyahu's just next.
I also want to mention very briefly before I also want to hear your thoughts, Karim. But yesterday there was this interview in Piers Morgan, and the Piers Morgan show,
Ah.
in which he talks to the Israeli negotiator of, with Hamas, and he says, since August of 2024, we have had multiple written proposals from Hamas saying we are willing to hand over the captives, we are willing to give up the governance of Gaza, and we're willing to end this war if uh, the demands that Hamas has, right? Like the opening up of all the crossings so that aid can come in, the return of the Palestinians to their homes, the withdrawal of the troops, etc., etc. So he says, since August of 2024, the Israeli government has chosen to ignore this and instead act like if it's Hamas that is doing all of this, right? That is doing the starvation, as if it's Hamas that is the one that is killing the Palestinian people, which is kind of like this rhetoric that just keep being repeated in the media. As far as what you're saying about Netanyahu, feeling like the ground shrink underneath his feet. This week, did you see the picture of him with like 2 dozen U.S. Congress people? They were like in Tel
That's
Aviv.
okay. He's bought them. He's purchased them. That's it means nothing. I mean, that's what he does, photo ops to show it, it, I don't think it means anything. These people will say anything Netanyahu tells them to say. They shouldn't even be representatives of American government anymore. But I don't think that matters. I think what matters is the 550 top Israeli security and military officials who signed on to a letter saying, "Stop this war! You're destroying Israel." And
Yeah.
today, Sarah Netanyahu. Oh my God, she reminds me so much. I know this is awful. Of Fiona from Shrek. I don't know. Every time I see her, I just see Fiona. Um,
Which
I,
version of Fiona?
the
The
ogre.
ogre version, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, who's kind of cute, but I mean, she just looks like her. I really wasn't being disparaging against a woman. I just see her, but actually, maybe I did say it deliberately because she says such obscene things. But today she said something like, "Can you imagine that they're choosing the hostages over defeating Hamas?" Like she was
Ab-
berating.
about the army chief.
Yeah, she was berating the army chief. What a statement. What a bubble
And she says,
Fiona Netanyahu lives in. My
she
God.
says, I told my husband not to pick him.
Yeah,
That's a
I
very
know.
interesting
I
little
know.
tidbit right there. What do you think, Karim, of this whole situation?
Oh,
Yeah, I
Lord.
think for the Israelis, this is the time they want to expand. They expanded in Syria. They want to expand into Gaza. Yani there is no return for Palestinians to Gaza. And they have Nawaf Salam in Lebanon and Joseph On that will allow them to expand in Lebanon. And for Netanyahu, this is the time. And for the far right of Israel, this is the time. And also, if you heard what Trump said yesterday, which was like somehow shocking for me because all what they were saying yesterday in the Hebrew media and the day before is that okay, we have no problem to occupy Gaza, but why Israel should feed 2 million people? Do Israel want to spend like millions of dollars to feed these people? And funny enough, that yesterday at night, Trump said exactly when he went to address the nation or whatever. He said after Israel occupies Gaza, not Israel will feed the Gazans. Arab countries will pay for it. So I think they already know what they are doing. Already they have the plans on the papers, and now they are acting. So
My God.
I think they will go in, and the Arab countries will take some Gazans and they will donate or be the like the angels that will give money for Gazans. And I think this will happen because also Barak said that Sykes-Picot is over and we need a new Sykes-Picot, which means they need to reestablish new geography in the area. And this won't happen in other regions because, of course, you will see a powerful nation or people will know how to act. But unfortunately, in our region, the nations that should prevent this, such as Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia, they are the ones that are pushing also for it.
We
So
have we have
complete.
just a donation from Yorkshire Sam. He says, "Why doesn't the PA formally request UN peacekeepers in Gaza and the West Bank to call the US and Israel's bluff? Because the PA is not an independent actor. They follow orders and they follow them very very closely." Somebody's saying I missed the $50 donation. I don't think we did because we did mention it right from Gulnara, if
Yeah,
I'm
and
not
I put it
mistaken.
on the
Yeah.
screen.
So thank you again. In any case, thank you so much, and thank you to everyone. Make sure to leave that like. Don't forget about that.
And another
Thank
one
you,
from
Javier.
Javier.
Oh, Javier Gatica. Good to see your beautiful face as well. Thank you very much.
Thank he means me. Thank you.
He did. Everyone means you, Karim. They're in love with you.
Okay, so Karim's also very, very naturally pessimistic on stuff like this, because, of course, in a perfect world, actors would act according to international law, according to the interests of their populations and their countries. And in the Arab world, you don't see that.
100%.
But I also constantly am trying um, to, explain to him, woman explain to him, I guess, that whereas in the past, the U.S. and the Western powers had so much clout that they could impose any construct that they came up with on pretty much anywhere. Okay, especially after the Cold War and the demise of the Soviet Union, that no longer exists. The US can talk up a storm, but nothing actually materializes except chaos. Now, chaos in itself is a solution that the Americans don't mind if they can't attain their goals, because in chaos you can find opportunity. And because the US is proximity, in terms of geographical proximity, so far away from the conflict zones in which it sort of, incites, it can make hay from almost any situation, okay? But it cannot achieve its goals any longer. It will not be able to declare the Trump Riviera. It will not be able to move 2 million Palestinians to other countries. It's become so bad, Arab states could not possibly accept them.
Did you see that
In Egypt,
Indonesia?
in
Did you see
Egypt,
what Indonesia
people,
said? That
what,
they are ready to prepare. They are like preparing an uninhabited island to house about 2,000 injured Palestinians that will go back to Gaza. Don't think
yeah,
anything wrong
injury
here.
is different. I think we had the Indonesia hospital here when the
Hmm.
port explosion happened. We had the Moroccan hospital here when the port, everybody came for that brief period. At any rate, that's not, there, we do hear about Palestinians being airlifted or moved out of Gaza under the auspices of the Americans and Israelis, but we're hard pressed to find actual evidence of this, except probably small numbers. Okay,
Except
so
for except for that girl who was barred from going to school in France. Remember, for an anti-Semitic post. That was just a few days ago.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, the point is, U.S. constructs don't happen, but chaos is almost just as bad. All right, but the Americans will not be able to get any of their projects done because there's so much pushback, and I think Americans and British and French have become extremely sick of their governments. Okay, so
Yes.
don't forget the pushback inside. I mean, this is why I want the Cradle to focus more on covering Hebrew media reports, because actually, I think if our readers and readers in general in English knew what was happening in Israel, on a daily basis and could see the signs of collapse, they would feel, a lot less pessimistic about the outcome. I mean, all of this is painful, but I believe the outcome will be, the end of Israel as a Jewish state. That we will have one state, which is exactly why they're pushing two state now, because they can see the writing on the wall, and nobody's going to be able to accept this. And even if they all sign on to it, in actuality, what did every awful thing that Israel did to Palestinians in the West Bank, in Gaza, in East Jerusalem, what did that get them? They really could never get a handle on these populations. They could never. The populations always pushed back. And now you have global powers pushing back. You know, and by the way, the Western Israeli narrative completely collapsing. Those things are huge developments from the yesteryear mentality that Karim is referring to, which is, the Americans are going to go do this, they're going to go do that. No, they can't. They can't. Everywhere there's pushback. By the way, even in the sort of Russian, Iranian, Chinese projects, there's pushback. Weirder time where you have two poles vying with each other. Okay, one that talks a lot, okay, and drops a lot of bombs, and the other side that's trying to get fellow thinking nations, aspirational nations in terms of economy and development on the same page, which is slowly, slowly, and increasingly every year taking shape. So, as time passes, this gap is growing. The Americans are shrinking because they've lost the global narrative. And this one is gaining traction. I don't see how the outcome can be. Of course, the fear exists that if the Atlanticists lose everything, that they might just kill everyone,
I feel
which
that that's a very well-founded fear, you know.
it is a well-founded fear. But I don't,
It's not
you
a
have,
theory, it's a future fact.
yeah. But the thing is, who are they going to nuke? And if they nuked Russia or China, they'd get nuked back.
They indeed get nuked back. Guys, let's go over a couple of the questions from the Patreon. We had many questions from the Patreon, but I want to say a couple of things first. First, guys, thank you so much for being Patreon members. All of you who sent questions, thank you so very much. And I hope more and more of you become Patreon members. When you're sending your questions, just try to send one, maybe two, because we have a few that are like, like six questions in one. So as we go, we will try to go all over them. In any case, there's a couple here that I want to go over, and especially because we already gone kind of long with this episode. And maybe I'll answer this one first. It says, this is from Mike, MIC. Have there been any attempts to deliver aid via drones to Gaza, of course, via air or sea? If not, if why? Well, I guess he says, if not, why? Why send one solitary ship to break the blockade? Israel will shoot at them. He says the Ukraine war shows us that front lines can be resupplied by drones. So he's saying, why haven't they been trying to use drones, airdrops?
Uh,
I think,
the,
let me just mention two things, Karim, before you go on. One, Israel is always going to be shooting them down. Like, look at the way that they act with the flotilla, right? Like they even shot a drone at the first flotilla, right at the first one, before Greta Thunberg and the European MP went, and etc. And also, it reminds me of something, and this is also what I want to hear from you, Karim. Remember when Yemen used to repurpose missiles to send aid into the besieged areas? I think in Hadramaut, in central Yemen.
mm,
And they had this video, and we also at the Cradle, because at this point we were already around, we reported on it. We did a whole video. It's a very interesting thing that I urge everyone to go look it up, how Ansar Allah would repurpose rockets to remove the explosive, stick food in, and send it into the besieged areas to make sure that the people had at least something to eat. I feel like with the Palestinians, sadly, there is no one that is in the proximity that can actually achieve that. With that being said, what do you think, Karim?
no, there are airdrops since like last week, but they are very few. And of course, not everybody can do it. Only Israeli allies. Currently, only Jordan and UAE are doing it, but in few
I
numbers.
think Britain
And
also did it because they were
yeah, Britain
trumpeting about it.
and Trump also said that they dropped $60 million worth of food. I don't know. Maybe the American food are so expensive. I don't know where are the 60 million.
Did you see the food that the food packets that some Palestinians were opening that had moldy food inside? And this was the airdrop food.
Oh, it was awful.
It's
It was awful to see that.
they did this since 2023, and since the
Yeah.
few يعني couple of months starting the war, and they used to do this, and also the Emiratis used to only send them these white covers. for the dead people.
The shrouds.
Mm.
The shrouds, and people expect aid or food, and they open it and they see shrouds. It's so evil.
It's truly evil. It is truly evil.
I think
So yeah, I think
drones don't make a lot of sense in such a small
No,
strip
no,
of land. There's no real geographic depth,
no,
and
nothing.
I think the Israelis would logically view drones as potentially
Yeah, of
hostile,
course.
whereas and like 1,000 drones coming in would be,
I mean,
obviously an opportunity for other regional states to send drones alongside them to hit Israeli targets. I don't know. I don't think the Axis would do that, but
they see baby formula as threatening. The Israelis.
yeah. And also sending, why send one solitary ship to break the blockade instead of a swarm of um yeah, I just don't think, given the fact that it's a conflict zone, active military zone, that drones would be a useful thing. In fact, what should happen is major international bodies agreeing to send aid directly in protected national ships
In navy
to
vessels,
Gaza.
right?
And I think that's where we're going to get to. Um,
Remember, before I move on to the other question I wanna bring up is that at the end of this month, the Gaza Freedom Flotilla Coalition, I hope I'm getting that name right, has announced that they're gonna send, I think they said 12, like a large number of ships. It's no longer gonna be one. They're gonna send a whole bunch. So we, are gonna have to wait and see how the Israeli occupation responds to that. Let's go to a different question from Ronnie Graham. It's very small type here in my phone. I need to read it very closely. He says, "What do you say about Lavrov and Putin meet up with Giuliani? And then he asks another one: Should China and Russia be at least stopping diplomatic and trade relations with Israel?" So the first one, earlier this week, Lavrov said he met with the foreign minister Shaibani, I think is his first name, one of these
Shibani.
Al Qaeda head choppers, and said we want Shara to come and for the Arab League Russia summit that is happening. You forgive me, I do not remember when it's happening. So you know, I'll let you guys go on in a second. Just Russia wants to keep their bases right in Tartus and in Latakia.
hmm.
What do you
I
think?
don't think that's I don't think that's their top priority. I think there are other avenues for them, and they're not hanging their hat on keeping the space. Okay, because the Americans so obviously dominate now, in Syria. And
You
so
don't think it's
they're
strategic for
not
them?
counting on it. Okay, they're not being
Mhm.
nice to the Syrians in order, please let us keep our base in Tartus. I don't think that's the issue at all. I think that the Russians, like the new powers on the block in the world, the multipolar powers, the thinkers, the strategists, keep open relations. I've said this many times before. They keep relations with every single country because the world is recalibrating so much. And why would you cut yourself out from any potential emerging constellation of, regional constellation of events, of uh, maybe partners, etc. So Russia has a big stake in the Persian Gulf. Obviously, these are pro-U.S. Countries, but have share common interests with Russia on oil prices and gas prices to keep them high, so their economies can thrive. Um, find commonalities, maybe sideline or ignore the differences as long as possible, and exploit the commonalities. And why would Russia allow or want the Turks, the Israelis, the Persian Gulf states to decide Syria's fate, which will then affect Lebanon, which would then affect Iraq, which would then affect Iran, and go into Russia's sphere? Why would they why would they stay out of that? You have to have really, like,
Hola.
I'm passionate about some things. I think some things in international relations are right and some are wrong, but IR itself is very pragmatic. Countries exists within borders for a reason. We want sovereignty for a reason. We want relations between countries, nation states, for a reason. And we want non-interference in the business of nation states for a reason. So the good actors on the global stage will act that way. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I mean, Jolani's a head chopper. Nobody should deal with him, but in fact, people are for self-interest, okay?
Yeah.
Russia's not going to step away from that. China's not going to, as long as Syria's not launching,
Or it
Uyghur
becomes a
terrorists
launching
into
pad for
China
attacks. Yeah.
or Chechen terrorists into Russia, they will engage so that they are part of the new configurations that are emerging in West Asia and other parts of
I
Asia,
um I just want to add
Eurasia.
a couple of things. One, well, in geopolitics, there's really no friends, right? There's only interest. But today, the Syrian
Correct.
Observatory for Human Rights came out and said that since the head chopper in chief in Damascus came to power, 10,000 people have been killed, or nearly 10,000 people. A large chunk of them civilians, over 7,000, I think nearly 8,000 of
Yeah.
them being civilians. And right now Russia is in the middle of the trial of the Tajiks who attacked the Crocus City Music Hall last year. Remember, and they said they called them ISIS as well.
I mean, we just released that statistic last podcast about over 500,000 people dying every single year as a result of U.S. sanctions. Why does
564,000.
anyone have relations with the United States? It doesn't work that way. You have to think opportunistic. I mean, not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying that's how international relations work
It is.
and are set up to work. But Ronnie Graham also has the question: should China and Russia be at least stopping diplomatic and trade relations with Israel? That's also not going to happen because actually keeping relations, even with countries that you fundamentally despise, that are upending all systems that you actually want in place, is useful for when it's useful. Okay, so as long as you have relations, you can make that phone call on something that serves your interests. But I think we're going to see Russia and China. So everyone watches the big players, right? They don't watch the smaller players. We had 13 out of 30 something countries at the Hague group
In
that
Colombia,
met in
yeah.
Colombia that we covered. Only 13 signed on to saying, okay, we're not going to sell arms to Israel. We're not going to trade at all with Israel. That will grow, and it will grow to a point where the demands are the big countries step in, and that so things in IR don't happen suddenly. The only things that happen suddenly are sort of military aggressions, or right. I mean, or how the Americans act. They'll change
Indeed.
something overnight, but most countries don't operate that way, and so the process to break ties with Israel, stop all trade with Israel, boycott anything being manufactured in Israel. We are on that trajectory, but it happens in incremental steps and it happens as awareness shifts globally. You have to have the climate to then say, oh, I can do this. And by doing this, I will suddenly have more advantages globally than disadvantage.
You are correct. It's still not, you know.
Ripe
Uh,
yet, sadly,
yeah.
crazily.
I wanna just before Karim, do you have anything else to add to answer these questions?
No, no, everything is
No,
good.
oh my God, no! You're gonna disappoint all of your loyal fans in the chat. We have
By
a
the way, we're going
donation.
to answer more of the questions
No,
that y'all have
I
asked next time.
yeah,
It's not like we're going to just
I
ask
think
them in the
it's
order
best
they came in.
if we pick them exactly.
We
Like
yeah,
we'll
just
yeah,
just
we
pick
just
them.
weren't prepared this time, to be
yeah,
honest. Let's be
100%.
honest.
Yeah, it's
We
fine.
didn't
I
see
want to.
them till 15 minutes before the broadcast, did we, Kenny?
Yeah, thank you, Sharmi. So, as Esteban said, I expected like short questions, like broad questions, not like this. Yani, one in
They
10.
sent us individually like these very long
Yeah.
questions, which I
So
appreciate. I really
I,
appreciate because
I
go ahead.
just want to add something to the question that was asked. I think the question should be asked in a different way. It should be in a opposite way because here, the people that were against Assad and against the regime in Syria where are the ones now who are ruling Syria. These the ones that said that the shaitan or the Satan is Russia. The country that killed most of the Thawar or the rebels is Russia. The country that prevent us from getting back our land or freeing Syria is Russia. They should be asked why they went to Russia, not why Russia is talking to them because Russia is one of the most powerful countries in the world, and usually they don't have enemies.
Indeed.
Yani, what meaning is that even during under war with Ukraine, they are willing to sit and talk with Ukraine. During the
Mm.
maximum sanctions with the United States, they are willing and they sat with the United States. These countries are not small countries. Uh, Same applies to Russia. Same applies even to regional countries like Iran. But the question should be asked: why these people that accused Russia of horrible things and they said that Russia is the biggest obstacle are still allowing Russian base in Syria, and why they went there? And these the same people that said that Assad is preventing us of liberating Jerusalem and Palestine, and now they are being bombed by the Israelis, and they didn't even fire one bullet, or even like a strong condemnation. So
Mm.
I think we should ask them, not ask the Russians.
I
Very
also
good
want to
point.
say regarding these questions, just for people, for our patrons in the future, um, there's some of these questions are not like current. They go back in history, like why did Arab nationalists do this, and how was the state of Palestine created? Um, I'd rather not use this time to answer those questions because a lot of our viewers would know that. Not to say I don't appreciate the interest in learning it. I would run these through Chat GPS or do some
GPT. Yeah.
research and then come to the more current questions. I only say that these are very legitimate questions, and I think in answering them, we're going to remember a lot of stuff that we've forgotten as well. But I think because we're doing current events and there's so many happening, it would be crazy for us to dig back into history. Maybe on occasion we'll answer a question like that, but the more current event related your questions are, the more likely I think they are to be answered, because we think a larger grouping of our viewers would be interested in a question. We're not answering the questions that we want to answer. I think we're basically, Esteban, you, I'm sure, are looking at the questions that you think the viewers would like answers for.
Exactly, the most topical ones, the most topical ones. In any case, I want to thank them for sending them because there's an
Yeah.
obvious interest and there's an obvious appreciation, in hearing our thoughts. And as in every other episode, I think the best way we can approach it is that like we'll just grab them from the mailbag and answer a couple each time with the ones we find the most relevant. We'll get to yours for sure at some point. I want to thank Halil for a 65, I think this is Swedish krona donation, and the same for Sore Bro. I imagine this is how you pronounce it. Do Karim follow Late's reportage on Palestina TV? Cheers from Sweden.
I'm
I
glad
think.
that I typed them and you read them.
In any case, I want to thank everyone so much for joining us today. And again, just to remind you, before you leave that like, share this stream, and subscribe to our channel, and check out our memberships. But more importantly, check out our Patreon, where you can also access exclusive content that we're going to continue to expand on as the days and the weeks go on. As usual, it has been a lot of fun. I really do love our commenters, or the comment section is amazing. I know there's some trolls every so often. Don't get too caught up in that. Even the trolls help with the algorithm. But for the Cradle News Roundup, I want to thank you. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Sharmin Arwani, and we'll see you on Monday.
Goodbye.